Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Friday, May 1st, 2020. Today I'm going to talk about the latest news within the coronavirus of sports, including a sport returning this month. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? We'll recap last night's episode and look ahead to Sunday night's episodes of American Idol and The Last Dance. We'll talk about the reruns of classic sports events and games that were on yesterday and will be on over the weekend. And I'll do my 2015 Nhl Redraft. All right, we'll start with the coronavirus. The biggest story of yesterday was that NASCAR announced that they will be returning May 17th from Darlington without fans. I think this is huge. Kudos to NASCAR for being perhaps the first sport to return. May 17th, 3:30 on Fox is the race. And then they have a schedule for a couple races here. They're starting off in Darlington, and then the Xfinity Series Tuesday, May 19th at 8 o'clock on FS1, and the Sprint Cup Series Wednesday, May 20th, 8 o'clock on Fox Sports 1, and then Charlotte, the race, the Cup Series race is May 24th, 6 o'clock on Fox. That's kind of a night race there. Xfinity's Monday at 7:30. Then the Truck Series is Tuesday, May 26th at 8, and then a rerun, it looks like, of the Cup Series May 27th at 8 o'clock on FS1. So this is absolutely humongous. NASCAR is also taking a risk here, too, because if somebody gets tested positive, do they cancel the race? Do the rest of the sports look at that and it's a setback? Who knows? But there's a lot of risk to this as well. But I think it's a great first step in terms of things getting back to normal. And kudos to the governors of North Carolina and South Carolina and NASCAR for working this out. It looks like that the Homestead Miami race will happen in June as well, because Florida is slowly but surely reopening some things. The only cities that are hotspots in Florida for COVID-19 are Miami and Tampa, and pretty much the rest of the state is actually okay. A lot of those Midwest states, with the exception of Illinois, like Chicago, are fine. So I'm interested to see, like, what other races NASCAR will have. I just rattled off the schedule for the first 2 weeks. Obviously, a big storyline heading into that is that no Kyle Larson, because NASCAR suspended him for the racial slur he said in the iRace. And obviously, he was fired from his team. So he's technically a NASCAR free agent. A lot of the drivers are coming out and saying that they think he'll be back and that he should come back. And his apology was sincere enough. He's one of the better underrated drivers, in my opinion, in NASCAR. I do think he'll be back at some point, but not right away. But you know who will be back for that May 17th, perhaps, and that is Ryan Newman, who obviously suffered that major accident at Daytona in February, and everybody was worried about him. It turns out that he's okay and he recovered. So that is good news for NASCAR, that we'll see Ryan Newman in a race car. And obviously the race will be without fans. I think that the ratings are going to be through the roof, and Fox is going to be thrilled with that. The event that got canceled due to COVID-19 was the Little League World Series. This should come to no surprise. I do think it's a little early for that, but I do think it's probably the right call because of the unknown and because they're kids and there's all these families coming in from other countries, and there's normally a team from Europe that come over to the States and participate in the Little League World Series. So I do think that is the right call. So one of the more underrated and fun sporting events of the years in the Little League World Series will not happen in 2020. So we'll have to wait until 2021 to see that. The hot NBA rumors that the Disney World thing is absolutely real. I do think it's a good plan for the NBA, like I discussed yesterday. There are a lot of hotels in Disney World. There's obviously the arena where college basketball games are held in tournaments too. And they can even use the Magic's arena in Orlando. It's not just Disney World, it's the city of Orlando. But Disney is being used as the hot spot for the NBA because of all the hotels and because they have an arena there as well. NHL, the more you're hearing is that they are looking to get teams quarantined in like certain hotspots maybe at the end of May, and they're looking at in perhaps late June, early July type of start deal. So that's something to monitor. And then Major League Baseball is eyeing a late June start. The league is trying to squeeze in 100 games with momentum building from both owners and players, according to a source. So that is good news regarding baseball. Like, I do think we'll have those three sports back. I think the NFL will start on time, but I don't feel strongly about that. There was a rumor that came out yesterday from the New York Post that if college football's canceled in the NFL, it's going to put some games on Saturday, which I think would be ideal if college football is indeed canceled. I think college football is the most likely sport to get canceled, but I do not think it will. There's obviously campuses that are talking about reopening. A lot of these schools are talking about opening. Obviously, Dabo Swinney thinks it's going to start on time, and obviously Dabo is somebody that's very smart and in the know in college football, and I believe in Dabo Swinney. So I do think college football is going to start on time. That's an unpopular opinion, but I do think that there won't be enough practices that could potentially affect teams into the season. College basketball, I think, will start on time. John Rothstein's very positive about that, and he keeps tweeting out preseason lists already going into the next season. So I think college basketball is safe, but like I said, the sport, in my opinion, that's most likely to get affected the most and perhaps to be canceled for 2020 is college football. But I do think that they're going to have college football back, and I do think it's going to start on time. And then the worst case scenario is that it's late in October and they just play conference games, and then they reschedule those non-conference games for later years. So that's enough with sports and the coronavirus, and obviously we'll talk about any rumors and news that comes out over the weekend on Monday's show. Now I want to recap last night's episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It was a pretty fun show. It kicked off resuming Anthony Anderson playing for his family foundation, the Anderson Family Foundation. His help was Jonathan Grove. He got the $32,000 question wrong, but went home with $32,000 for his charity. Then came in Ike Brainholtz. Dave Weigel was the help, and the charity was Uplift Family Services. His phone a friend was his dad, and he was on the $125,000 question. He got that right, and he was on $250,000, but he walked away with $125,000 because he was unsure of the answer, and his dad and his friend Dave Weigel disagreed on the answer, and it turned out that Weigel was correct, and Ike sounded like he agreed with his father. So Ike walks away with $125,000 for his charity. Then came in Hannibal Buress. The help is Buzzy Cohen, and they got a couple questions into the show, and then the horn went off, and Burris will continue next Thursday night for his quest for $1 million for his charity. Now I want to talk about Sunday night's episode of American Idol, 8 o'clock on ABC. The top 10 will be unveiled. I believe there is a theme to the episode on Sunday. I think it's going to be like songs that like have meaning to you and stuff like that. So without further ado, here are my picks to move on to the American Idol top 10. All right. Joven Webb. He performed With a Little Help from My Friends by Joe Cocker last week, and I believe he belongs. Louis Knight, who performed If the World Was Ending by J.P. Sachs featuring Julia Michaels. I think he was outstanding. Francisco Martin, who performed Teenage Dream by Katy Perry. This guy has improved every week. I was down on him after the Hollywood round, but he really, in my opinion, has improved so much. And now here I am picking him to go to the top 10. Dwayne Crocker Jr. with I Feel Good by James Brown. I thought he was outstanding with his performance. Johnny West with What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. That's what he performed last week. Joven's obviously the boyfriend of Margie, who was voted off in the Hollywood round, and I was annoyed that Idol kept showing her during the Hawaii performances, and she was not heard from last week, which I think is very good, and I think that is a distraction out of the way for Johnny, and Johnny could just be himself and not deal with her in the spotlight. Just Sam. I think she is amazing. She performed Believe by Fantasia, and I really think that she has a real shot to win the whole thing. Julia Gargano. She performed Human by Christina Perri. I thought she really kicked butt. It was one of her better performances of the season. Sophia James, or Sophia Wackerman, I don't know why she changed her name. She performed Burning by Maggie Rogers. I thought she was great. I think she will go to the top 10. Grace Lear with Cry by Faith Hill. That was her performance last week, and I thought she kicked butt and really made a case for herself. And last but not least, my last pick to go to the top 10 is Olivia Zemes. She performed Bad Guy by Billie Eilish. She blew me away with that one. It was very different for her, and it was nice to see her perform something that wasn't really her forte and absolutely nail it. And she really stood out to me. So I do think that she will advance. There's a lot of talented singers that I did not pick to go to the top 10. Dylan James, he had a good performance. Would not surprise me if he goes through. Arthur Gunn performed Love Machine by Wynonie Harris last week. I won't be shocked if he goes through. Nick Marrico performed Hey There Delilah by the Plain White T's. I won't be surprised if he goes through. Kimmy Gabriella performed Leave Me Lonely by Ariana Grande. I won't be that shocked if she goes through. So there are a lot of talented singers that are going to get the boot this week, and that's very unfortunate. So again, my top 10 picks: Jovan Webb, Olivia Exemis, Louis Knight, Francisco Martin, Sophia James Wackerman, Dwayne Crocker Jr., Julia Gargano, Grace Lear, Just Sam, and Johnny West. So 5 boys, 5 girls. It turns out to be very even for the top 10 of American Idol. Now I want to preview Sunday night's episodes of The Last Dance, episodes 5 and 6. You'll see a lot of Jordan versus the New York Knicks in the 90s. You'll see Kobe Bryant in one of these episodes as well, and that's going to be very emotional for all of us, seeing the late, great Kobe Bean Bryant in this documentary. He probably has a speaking part, meaning like interview, in the episode as well. The 5th episode is about the Air Jordan and making him profoundly a significant culture figure. And then episode 6 is about his gambling and coming under extraordinary scrutiny. So a lot of drama to come in these next 2 episodes of The Last Dance, which I am also very looking forward to. Now I want to talk about some rewatches of sports games and events that have been on. Last night, ESPN re-aired a classic college football game that featured 2 Big Ten rivalries that are in the top 3. Obviously, Ohio State and Michigan. That was played at the Shoe in Columbus. And the game went to overtime. And obviously it came down to a 4th and 1. And JT Barrett, it was a questionable spot that I think he got the first down by the slimmest margin ever. And then the next play, Curtis Samuel gets the game-winning touchdown, and then Ohio State goes on to win the Big Ten championship game. And then they end up they don't make the Big Ten championship game because Penn State won the East that year. Now it's the year that Penn State upset Ohio State, led by Saquon Barkley. And Penn State wins the Big Ten, but they don't go to the playoff because they have 2 losses. And then, obviously, Ohio State goes to the playoff, and then they lose to Clemson and get blown out by Deshaun Watson and company. In terms of what's to come on tonight and over the weekend, 1989 college football, Notre Dame versus West Virginia, the Fiesta Bowl. So Notre Dame classics are going to be on. And it's not just Notre Dame on NBCSN. You have the Fiesta Bowl in 1987 between Miami and Penn State. The Orange Bowl in 1984 between Miami and Nebraska, which was a fantastic game. 2007 Cavs Pistons. I wonder if that was I think that's the Game 7 with LeBron going off and carrying the Cavs to the finals. 1989 ALCS Game 2, Toronto and Oakland. Over the weekend on the bigger networks, NBC has Premier League Soccer, May 13th, 2012, Manchester City against Queen's Park Rangers. The 2015 Kentucky Derby, It's the 5-year anniversary of American Pharaoh, who wound up winning the Triple Crown. And then CBS is re-airing the Wells Fargo Championship final round from 2015. Saturday night on Fox, they're re-airing the Super Bowl from this past year between the 49ers and the Chiefs. Obviously, the Chiefs come from behind and win that Super Bowl, led by Patrick Mahomes. ABC is re-airing Lakers-Pistons 2004 Game 5, so the Pistons championship with Rasheed Wallace and those boys. Or it might have been Ben Wallace on that team, not Rasheed. And then the Mavericks Heat 2011 Game 6, so that was when Dirk won his ring against LeBron in the Heat. That's probably LeBron's worst loss of his career, in my opinion, losing to that Dallas team. Because that was the worst team to win an NBA championship, in my opinion, the last decade. So I think that was the worst loss of LeBron James's career, in my mind, series loss to the severely underdog Mavericks. That wasn't a bad team per se, but that was a team that certainly was not expected to win the championship. 1996 NFC Championship game between the Green Bay Packers and the Dallas Cowboys. So that was when the Cowboys advanced to the Super Bowl, beating Brett Favre and the Packers. January 5th, 2010, the World Junior Gold Medal game between Canada and the United States. So that's an interesting game for NBC to re-air. And then the 2018 Wells Fargo Championship final round will be re-aired on CBS on Sunday afternoon. Now I'm going to do my 2015 NHL Redraft. This one's interesting. And it's loaded too. You're going to be seeing good players in the teens and in the 20s in this one. So, without further ado, here we go. No surprise at the top. Number 1, Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid. No do-over there as the Oilers take who is now the very best player in the NHL in Connor McDavid. The Buffalo Sabres at number 2 go with Jack Eichel, so no do-over for the Sabres as they take their franchise guy in Jack Eichel. Number 3, the Arizona Coyotes go with Mikko Rantanen, somebody who really has come into his own over the past 2 years. The Avalanche love him. It is Nathan McKinnon's running mate and will be perhaps his running mate for years to come. Instead, the Coyotes go with Dylan Strome. The Maple Leafs at number 4 go with Mitch Marner, so no do-over here as the Leafs get their guy in Marner, who really is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated players in the league because he's overshadowed on that team by Austin Matthews and John Tavares. The Hurricanes at 5 go with Sebastian Aho. No, it's not really a do-over, but it's what a coincidence because Sebastian Aho, Carolina stole in the second round, and he's really become a franchise player for that team. And instead they went with Noah Hannafin, who they traded away. The New Jersey Devils at 6, Kyle Connor. Kyle Connor is somebody that really came into his own this season before the stoppage of play. He was having himself a career year on the Jets and really entering the conversation as into the best young players in the league. And imagine Kyle Connor on the Devils. Maybe who knows? If he's on that team and they still do the Taylor Hall deal, things are much different for the Devils, and maybe Taylor Hall is still a Devil. And instead they go with Pavel Zacha, who's a bust. The Flyers at 7 go with Travis Konechny. What a coincidence. They stole him late in the first round, and now he's one of the better players on the Flyers. And one of the more up-and-coming young centers in the league. And he really is a solid contributor for the Flyers. And instead they go with Ivan Provorov, which proved to actually be a good pick. The Blue Jackets at 8 go with Matthew Barzal. Barzal, somebody who won the Calder Trophy a few years ago, had a down year last year, and then this year is having a good season. And someone that I think the Islanders are going to build around for years to come. Instead, they go with Zach Werenski, which was a good pick. The Sharks at number 9 go with Zach Werenski. Like I said, this class was absolutely loaded. That Zach Werenski falls to 9. So say the Sharks actually take Werenski here, then they have Werenski, Brent Burns, and then say they still do the Karlsson deal. That is a great foundation on defense for the Sharks, although Karlsson, in my opinion, is a player that's sort of in decline due to injury concerns. The Avalanche at number 10 go with Brock Boeser. With Rantanen off the board, the Avs take another all-star forward in Boeser, who really has come into his own playing with Elias Pettersson on that Canucks team that's up and coming in the Western Conference. 11, the Florida Panthers go with Timo Meier. So Meier falls from 9 to 11. Meier has been a really good player for the Sharks these past couple years, and he would have been fun on the Panthers as well. The Stars at number 12 go with Thomas Chabot, someone who really has come into his own as a top-pairing defenseman for the Ottawa Senators. And could you imagine Thomas Chabot, Miro Heiskanen, and John Klingberg on the same defense? Instead, the Stars go with Denis Guranov, who was a bust. The Bruins with 3 consecutive picks: Ivan Provorov, Noah Hanifin, and Dylan Strome. So Provorov falls to 13, Hanifin falls to 14, and these are 2 really solid defensemen for the Flyers and Flames respectively right now. Provorov will be an all-star someday. Hanifin's already made an all-star team. That defense would have been loaded with those 2, plus Charlie McAvoy and all the other good young defensemen they have. Boy, they kind of screwed up this first round of the draft, although they kind of made up for it in the later years, getting better players. And even in the 2014 draft, which we'll get to eventually. And instead, 13 and 14, they took Jakob Zobrel and Jake DeBrusk with 13 and 14. And 15th, they took Zachary Senyshyn. And in the redraft, I have them taking Dylan Strome, who is perceived as a bust because he hasn't really lived up to number 3 overall pick. But he has turned his career around and turned himself into a solid top 6 forward, perhaps a second-line center for the Blackhawks. And Dylan Strome probably would have been a trade bait player for Boston, and maybe Hanifin or Provorov's a trade bait guy as well. The New York Islanders at 16 go with Anthony Cirelli. So with Barzal off the board, they go with Anthony Cirelli, someone who the Lightning stole in one of the later rounds. He's a solid role player on the Lightning. He would have been a solid middle line forward for the Islanders. 17, the Winnipeg Jets, Roope Hintz. So with Kyle Connor off the board, the Jets go with a solid player, Roope Hintz. He's a top 6 forward on the Dallas Stars. Somebody who the Stars like. So I even said that there's good players in the late teens and the 20s that teams in this redraft are snagging. And Hintz is one of those guys. The Senators at 18 go with Anthony Beauvillier. With Thomas Chabot off the board, the Sens go with Beauvillier, someone who has shown some promise with the Islanders over the past couple of years. 19, the Red Wings go with Jake DeBrusk, somebody who hasn't really lived up to expectations with the Bruins. I think the Bruins were trying to trade him in a couple of trades, but failed to do so in terms of the Bruins trying to improve their team. And instead, the Red Wings here take Evgeny Svechnikov. The Wild at number 20 go with Vince Dunn, someone who's a very solid defenseman who the Blues stole in the second round. He probably would have been a second-pair defenseman on that team. Instead, the Wild go with Joel Eriksson Ek. 21, the Senators go with Brandon Carlo. So Brandon Carlo goes to 21 in this redraft, and he's someone else that is a really good player, a solid defenseman on the Bruins. That's why I said the Bruins kind of made up for it in some of the later rounds, although Carlo isn't like as talented as, say, Charlie McAvoy. But Carlo is somebody that's very serviceable on an NHL team, and the Senators, he would have been a fun little building block on that team. Instead, they go with Colin White in the actual draft. The Capitals at 22 go with Ilya Smazanov. So, funny how things work out. They don't do over, and they take their goalie of the future here. He showed a lot of promise this past season. He's obviously the guy going forward. Now the question is what happens with Braden Holtby. The Canucks at 23 go with Joel Eriksson Ek. Eriksson Ek is somebody that was struggling in the league, and he kind of starting to show some potential this year. He probably would have been a third-line guy for Vancouver. And instead, Vancouver goes with Brock Besser, who is obviously an all-star player. The Flyers at 24 go with Pavel Zacha. So with Travis Kelce off the board, they go with the Devils' lottery pick with Zacha, someone who showed some flashes but is not worth the 6th overall pick. The Jets at 25 go with Denis Gurinov. So they go with Gurinov here instead of the guy they took in Jack Roslovic. The Canadiens at 26 go with Colin White. So Colin White goes from 21 to 26. He's somebody that really hasn't lived up to lofty expectations with the Senators. Maybe it would have been different with the Habs. Instead, the Habs go with Nola Juulsen. The Ducks at 27 go with Jack Roslovic. Roslovic is somebody that I talked about a couple seconds ago with the Jets. He showed flashes, but he's somebody that hasn't lived up to expectations. Instead, the Ducks go with Jacob Larson. The Islanders at 28 go with Dominic Simone. With Bielviller off the board, they go with Simone, someone who was a 5th-round pick by the Penguins and really took advantage of his playing time with the Pens. And he probably would have fit in nicely as a third-line winger for the Isles. The Jackets at 29 go with Lawson Krause, so a first-round bust falls to 29. Maybe change of scenery could help. Instead, they go with Gabriel Carlson. And number 30, the Arizona Coyotes go with Travis Dermott, someone who is currently on the Maple Leafs as a solid defenseman for them. Was taken in the 2nd round. And instead, they go with Nick Merkley. Alright, so that's it for the redraft and the podcast for today. I'll be back on Monday recapping the latest news within the coronavirus and the latest news that comes out related to sports with that, or any just sports news in general. I'm going to do something I haven't done on the podcast in a while next week, and that is trade value countdowns. Monday will be the NFL. Tuesday will be Major League Baseball. Thursday will be the NBA, and Friday will be the NHL. Wednesday next week, I'm going to do my very first MLB mock draft of 2020, so that should be fun. I'm also going to be doing top 10 players and games in the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, and the NHL, respectively, from the calendar year 2017. So that should be fun as well. And I'll do those countdowns on the same days I'm doing the trade value for each league. So Monday's all NFL, Tuesday's MLB, Thursday will be NBA, and Friday will be NHL. Hope you guys have a great weekend, everybody.